a Call 7 investigator special.
They don't want the information to be known as far as what actually happened. And that's all I was searching for, was the truth.
Your access to public records.
Of all the people that should have my report or should have the right to have it, it should be me, because it's my story.
Public records kept on your behalf.
You should be able to sit from your computer and anybody access any publicly available information and public documents on their own.
Paid for with your tax dollars.
It matters because self-government doesn't work without access to information.
To keep government transparent and accountable.
We're not doing this out of sport. We're doing this to comply with the law.
Public records out of reach.
They hide behind their cloak of secrecy, which is contrary to the public interest. And that's the phrase I've noticed that they use over and over and over again. Anytime someone goes to get their records released, they use the same phrase.
Call 7 investigators John Ferrugia and Kelly Raybon examine Colorado's open records laws and whether officials are acting contrary to the public interest.
This is pretty much how I was driving tonight when I was coming home from work. I wasn't speeding, I was following the road.
On a chilly April night in 2002, Terrell Johnson was driving home from his job as a Frontier Airlines mechanic.
I was getting off work about 11:30 at night. I see a cop car following me. Drove maybe 10, 15 more minutes and realized that he's still behind me.
When he arrived home,
I was coming from the alley taking my trash out. Then the same cops that were on the freeway following me showed up in front of my house. A couple of the officers jumped out of the vehicles, pulled guns on me. They arrested me, basically assaulted me and put me in jail.
It was unreal. I mean, I couldn't figure out why they were arresting him.
Johnson's wife, Mindy Jarvis, and young daughter watched in shock.
And it was a very helpless place to be.
Jarvis ran out of her home near 5 Points to ask Denver police why they attacked her husband.
I was like, I pay taxes, I have rights. And he said, sweetheart, you have no rights.
Bruised and scraped up from the officers' actions, Johnson wanted to know why they arrested him.
They tackled me, they punched me a few times, I had bruises on my body.
Johnson had never been in trouble with the law before his 2002 arrest, or since.
They just automatically assumed that you were part of a gang?
I would imagine because I was driving home at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night in a certain type of car. And that's why they profiled me and targeted me.
Targeted and unjustly arrested, the traffic and interference with police charges were dropped. After a night in jail and $5,000 of legal fees, Johnson filed a complaint with the Denver Police Department's Internal Affairs.
I knew I wasn't speeding, I knew I wasn't doing anything wrong, and I just felt that I was being profiled.
About a year later, Johnson found his excessive force complaint was not sustained, but parts of his grievance were.
When I went to follow up on that information, they wouldn't give it to me.
Citing the Colorado Criminal Justice Records Act, Denver police refused to let Johnson look at the details of the internal affairs investigation into his beating and improper arrest.
They hide behind their cloak of secrecy, which is contrary to the public interest. And that's the phrase I've noticed that they use over and over and over again. Anytime someone goes to get their records released, they use the same phrase.
Colorado's state open records laws are divided into two main parts. The Colorado Open Records Act governs how cities, public schools, state agencies, and other government offices release records. With some exemptions, those governments must release records within 3 to 10 business days. Then there's the Colorado Criminal Justice Records Act. It provides rules for law enforcement agency documents. In many cases, the Justice Records Act gives police wide discretion to deny any records if the police believe releasing the documents would be, quote, contrary to the public interest.
It's a terrible standard.
Tom Kelly is the president of the Colorado Freedom of Information Coalition and a partner in a Denver law firm that's represented many media organizations in the state, including 7 News.
It gives the custodian the right to decide basically whether he wants to disclose the record or not.
Police argue releasing records can jeopardize ongoing criminal investigations and crime victim privacy. But Kelly sees the law as a cloak that agencies drape over embarrassing or improper conduct.
That makes no sense. The purpose of the Criminal Justice Records Act is to permit law enforcement to investigate and detect crime, and not to shield them from being accountable on how they spend their money or do other things.
When Johnson was told releasing his report was contrary to the public interest, he didn't just walk away. He convinced the American Civil Liberties Union and members of Kelly's firm to take on the cops.
What made you take your fight to the next level?
Probably my background, military, aviation. I didn't want to just leave it as that. Pretty much I knew that they were in the wrong. I knew that everything they did was a lie.
And he was right. Johnson won in court, receiving a $75,000 settlement from the city for the false arrest. But there was more. Johnson's lawyers received $24,000 taxpayer dollars. Why? Denver District Court Judge Joseph E. Meyer III found that the city withholding many records was, quote, arbitrary and capricious.
Do you think it's more of contrary to their interest?
Oh, absolutely contrary to their interest. They don't want the information to be known as far as what actually happened. And that's all I was searching for, was the truth. The truth. I mean, there's only one truth.
But the city's improper denials continued despite the Johnson ruling. In 2005, a judge ruled the city improperly withheld IA records in another case, costing taxpayers $40,000 in legal fees. And in 2010, yet again, a judge ruled Denver improperly withheld internal affairs records, costing taxpayers $24,000 in lawyers' fees.
I found out that they do it all the time, and if you want your records, you actually have to go to court and sue for your records.
We wanted to know if the city changed its policy to save taxpayers from costly lawsuits. But in response to our request for the policy, a city records coordinator wrote, quote, there is no specific Department of Safety policy on releasing internal affairs investigations, adding the city still relies on criminal justice records laws, court rulings, and the police operations manual adopted in 2006 to determine what is contrary to the public interest.
I think the public interest standard as it applies to criminal justice records denies the public of just about everything except the most basic documents.
The basic documents are records of official actions like arrests and charges, but that's not what Johnson was looking for. He was looking for the investigation into his improper arrest and racial profiling.
If this could have happened to me, it could happen to anybody. So I didn't want to give up. I wasn't going to give up.
When Johnson won his court battle and finally received the internal affairs report, he found the officer's version of events raised even more questions. For example, the records show police on the scene told IA investigators that they saw Johnson making an obscene gesture while driving that night, but also claimed his windows were so darkly tinted that they couldn't discern his race.
You want to know their version of the story and what they said. And if you don't have that information, then you're just dealing with one side.
The documents showed 2 officers received written reprimands for failing to respect rights of individuals. There was also a memo from DPD's Patrol Division Chief saying there are, quote, troubling facts in the case that show officers arrested Johnson just because he was, quote, apparently hostile. The supervisor also wrote, the fact they later loaded traffic charges on the complainant, charges they knew could not be proved, is evidence they intended to punish the complainant for contempt of cop.
The only way to get to the truth is to get the records. And the only way to get justice is to get the records. So the records are everything.
What it really is a warning to others. Don't you dare ask any questions about this, or we will come after you in court.
Colorado's Open Records Request Act put to the test, but at what cost?
How should the taxpayers feel about that?